Basic idea is of our projection for the Canadian economy in the near to medium term is kind of good news in the medium to longer term, short-term speed bump, as we call it. In other words, a short-term interruption in what we would normally call a more optimistic story of longer-term growth. So let's put that in numerical context. If we go to, let me use it this way. If we go to GDP growth, right? Basically, we still don't know 2012, right, because we don't have the fourth quarter numbers, but as best we can tell from our projection, looks like it's going to be about 2%. Then, that's fairly weak for Canada on two counts. It's at best what our potential growth is, probably a little less, and we think we have an output gap. In other words, the Canadian economy fell in, well, there's that minus 2.8. We get the minus 2.8 that occurred in 2009. Yes, a bit of a snapback in 2010, 3.2, thank heavens. Okay, 2.6, probably a bit above our potential in 2011. But wait a minute, our potential is 2 to 2.5. We were minus 2.8 in 2009. That means a gap of over 5%. And 3.2 against 2 to 2.5 closes 1. 2.6 closes less than 1, so there's still a gap left. There's still a gap to go. These 2 years don't close it at all. Right? They're basically marking time, and you can see that with the unemployment rate. It has come down from the height that it reached in 2009. Over these 2 years, it's basically steady at 7.3. We haven't got enough growth to bring the unemployment rate down further. Then things start to pick up. So in our projection, we have a series of growth rates that are above potential. And not to forget that as we get out into the later years here, potential itself is declining in Canada, partly because our labor force growth is growing more slowly and more slowly. Why? Because, just looking around the audience here and seeing who's a baby boomer. Yeah, okay, all right. So we have some baby boomers here who are going to be flirting with retirement or early retirement. And so they will be pulling out of the labor force. Our labor force growth will fall. It won't go to zero, but it will fall. That reduces our potential growth. But the point is that during this period, we will have above potential growth. It's not huge by historical standards, but a lot of people find numbers like that, or a string of numbers like that, difficult to believe. And they're enough to start pulling the unemployment rate down into the lower sixes, which we would say, and this is an assumption based on past performance for us, we would say is much closer to full employment for the Canadian economy. So the story is then, the optimistic part of the story is, wait a year or so, we'll get growth rates that will close the output gap, not rapidly, but on a sustained basis. We'll get closer to what our full employment level will be. By the way, as that proceeds, interest rates will be rising because the Bank of Canada, as we get closer to full employment, will be raising those interest rates. It'll be taking away the monetary stimulus which has been there. That is both true of long and shorter term rates. And our government balances, now these are national accounts balances. They're not Mr. Flaherty's numbers or Duncan Taylor's numbers, which are somewhat different. That's just different accounting principles. But the balances of both levels of government will be going down. Now, some of that is fiscal retrenchment at both levels, at the provincial and federal basis, and some of it is basically the government balance getting better because we have better GDP growth because we're closing the gap on GDP.